my honor to read from William Cullen, one of our great poets of Long Island, who has left Long Island now to be up in Brockport, but nonetheless, with his Long Island Light and swastika poems and his great love for Long Island, it remains a Long Island poet. I'm happy to be able to say what he would like to say if he were here. He sent this to me to please read and share with you. Bill Hayen. I'm grateful to all those at Cedarmere today for honoring Max Wheat as Poet Laureate of Nassau County. I wish I could be with you. Our friend Max has been the island's faithful conscience for decades, has urged us all toward fulfilling our responsibility to preserve nature and to preserve the human capital of our courageous armed forces by not committing them to conflicts that are not in our or the world's best interest, and could and should be diffused politically. Max, we give you our hand. We give you our love, more precious than money. We shall stick by each other as long as we live.
Woo! Yeah! Beautiful.
Thank you, Patti, for expressing those wonderful thoughts. Before we go on, I just want to mention the album that we're collecting poems and messages for Max in.
Thank you.
Beverly is collecting the poems, and we're putting it in a special album for him for today. We'd love everybody to read, but it's not going to be possible. In our second hour, we're going to try and fit a few of you to read. Our next speaker has known Max for over 30 years. She is the head of PeaceSmiths in Amityville, Susan Blake.
How's that? Besides reading at PeaceSmiths Coffee House significantly, Max has introduced us to countless wonderful poets ever since. And this is one of the special things about him to us and to all of you, I'm sure, that he's as interested or more in building up the exposure and confidence of emerging and also established poets as he is in his own reputation enhancement, as he unabashedly calls it. I've always been amazed by Max's blend of humbleness and his low-keyed manner with his proud and determined insistence on quality. Ironically, we of PeaceSmiths Coffee House, which of course is run by a peace group, have known him over time as a naturalist and environmental writer, and as a powerful yet gentle communicator. It seemed only natural that he should address his beliefs we share about the U.S. war on Iraq, still retaining his sensitive, loving perspective, allowing the reader or audience to see the human face of war and then come to their own realizations. No matter what the subject, he's still illuminating with delicate intensity the beauty of nature and the balance of the ecology. After all, humanity too is a part of the web of life, and war is not good for the environment and people and other living things. Writing and reading from that controversial book is patriotic, for it is the duty of people living in a democracy to express ourselves with intentionality, even at profound personal risk. He was just doing what he always does, committing to word what he sees and inspiring others to contemplate and put out their own vision, whatever their point of view. A few years ago, when Laura Bush canceled an official poetry event for fear of the outspoken anti-war messages that would be descending on Washington, Max organized a Poets for Peace reading at the Quaker Meeting House in Westbury. Today, we irrepressibly celebrate Max just as he did celebrate the poets that day, that his voice must be heard. But as well as he knew how to galvanize poets to speak for peace, he also gracefully does not impose his views, and his role as Poet Laureate would have, or will, encourage poems by and enliven poetry for everyone. And I just want to mention that on September 15th at PeaceSmiths Annual Folk Dance Party in Freeport, we're hoping to hear a few poems from Max, and you're all welcome to come. And we want to declare him the People's Poet Laureate. May many
Thank you, Susan. I asked the next three women to read a poem for today: Beverly Koch, Maria Manabianco, and Judy Turek. They were on the committee to establish a Poet Laureate and gave their constant support throughout the Poet Laureate process. In addition, they volunteered to make this a wonderful day for Max, who they love, respect, and admire. I want to thank at this time, before I forget, Judy Turek for making the beautiful album we're putting the poems in, for shuttling people back and forth. I want to thank Maria for donating the cake we will be eating at the break, and thank all three for their donations and supplies for today. More importantly, I want to thank them for their friendship and devotion to Max. So each will come up and read their special poems. Beverly Koch.
I think most of you know me, but just in case, I'm Beverly Koch, Director of the Program Development for the Writers Guild, and one of the gypsies, Paula, Maria, and Judy being the other three. Because I saw a blurb in the events section of my local paper, I found and joined the Writers Guild, and in so doing, changed the course of my life.
Would you use microphone closer? Thank you.
The Guild is where I met Judy, Paula, and Maria when they joined a few years later. Because Paula got me interested in poetry with her poem about an ancient Egyptian queen, I got to know Max. Because Max said, "You too can write poetry," I tried. And because of this, I have learned how to look more closely at my world. I've learned to look at a bird and really see it. And I've learned which plants are native to this island and which, like me, are not. Because of Max, I've learned the history of this place. The early settlers simply called the Long Island, and learned how it evolved into Whitman's beloved Pomonok. I've learned how it spawned a school of poets, the headmaster of which is Max's rightful place on this and any other day. And the poem that came of this is called To the Max.
Very good.
Such a gentleman. Which hat does he wear today? Birder, conservationist, teacher, historian, humanitarian. Which pair of glasses is he looking through today? Those strong enough to magnify the pattern of a bird's feathers, to bring them up close enough to examine, to discern its age and condition. Or is he wearing those needed for the far-sighted view of a seer, a visionary, the one who'll write the future of that bird and how to save its kind from extinction? Which almanac does the poet praise this day? Which historic moment does he sing the details of? Which local hero does he immortalize? Which flower does he hope to save? Which prairie, marsh, or barrens will he teach us to call our home? Such a gentleman. Portly, almost old-fashioned, yet so modern in his way. This gentle lover of humanity sings songs of ginger, the chosen spice of his life. A true teacher who gives of himself to his students, to his wife. Too modest to sing songs of himself, he sings them in praise of those he's taught. He uses poetry to sing the praise of other poets. He uses poetry to sing of birds in song. He uses poetry to teach the ways of nature, preserving our island's state of being, its history, his constant lesson plan, using any place where poets gather as his classroom. And so I sing a song of Max, because Max won't sing a song of himself. He's too busy singing them of Long Island and of its poets, poets dead and living, and of Cedarmere, where all his loves combine. You may ask what makes a poet mean, what makes a poet write. I say love of humankind by this gentle man. What makes this gentleman the poet of his time, and the hat he wears this day, that of the People's Poet Laureate. To the Max.
Thank you, Beverly. Maria Montebianco.
I've known Max for over 12 years, and each year I got to love him more and more. So Max,
Turn the mic up.
I've known Max for over 12 years, and every year I got to love him more and more, because to know Max is to love him. My sonnet to Max. Maxwell Corydon Wheat Jr., the poet's name, a man for all ages, humble and mild, passionate teacher that never sought fame, promoter of language, unique and style, lover of nature, a burden with art, reviewer of poetry old and new, speaker, listener, always crying from his heart, performer of poems from personal view, often in honor as poet supreme, was stunned with surprise he had not a clue. He could not believe it was not a dream. But the spoilers came to do what spoilers do. They took all the good and threw it aside, filling hot air with incredible lies.
Thank you, Maria. Judy Turek, going to read from the book.
Now that's the best part. We wrote it.
Most of you know me. I'm Judy Turek, and I'm a poet. So I'm sitting in the parking lot waiting for poets to shuttle with a journal, thinking about Max. So these are some thoughts for Max, and then I'll read a poem for Max. And maybe by tonight, this will be a poem. Did you know bird's foot violets are the official Nassau County flower?
Yes.
They bloom in May on the Hempstead Plains. This I learned from Max. Did you know sandplain gerardia are federally endangered? 6 populations remain on Long Island, 1 on the Hempstead Plains. This too I learned from Max. Did you know piping plovers and roseate terns are endangered Long Island birds? This I learned from Max. And salt marshes are populated with communities of organisms that 80 years ago, on May 20th, Charles Lindbergh took off from Roosevelt Field on his historic flight to Paris. This too I learned from Max. Commingle nature with human condition. Write love poems without the word love or heart. That a poem is a poem is a poem, and is usually done before you realize. Do you know that you can embrace the world with words? This and so much more I learned from Max. The man in the distinguished hat. For Max, with thanks to President Lincoln. Our great nation was founded on principles of justice, conceived in liberty, dedicated to equal rights for all. Our poetry community thrives on loyalty to the craft, flourishing, embracing, blooming our thoughts through art. We stand in allegiance to our flag, our forefathers, our leaders in armed forces securing our borders, our safety. We stand in honor of our poetry leaders, teachers, mentors, who bring us inspiration, bring us knowledge, bring us to write. Government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. Freedom of the poets, by the poets, for the poets, shall be guided by the hand of Maxwell Corydon Wheat Jr. through our communities of Nassau County to preserve, protect, defend the wisdom of poetry in our society, encourage the study and writing of poetry in our schools, to lighten and sweeten toil, to grow great gardens of poems. Max, guide us in our hopeful pursuit of poetry, the discovery of poetry to cherish legacies, to blossom in the preservation of our county, enriched by the heritage of our history, to achieve a lasting poetic peace. We meet today in gladness, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in our right to proclaim you, Maxwell Corydon Wheat Jr., of the poets, by the poets, for the poets, our Nassau County Poet Laureate.
Yeah!
Thank you so much, Judy. We now have an honored guest who would like to say a few words. You all know him for his brave words to the Government Service Committee members, the one member who voted in favor of Maxwell Wheat's appointment. It is an honor to introduce you to Wayne Wheat.
I don't think we can have a more beautiful day, and I don't think we can have a better purpose for being here, quite frankly. It was my pleasure to have supported Max in the committee. The only thing I regret was that I hadn't had an opportunity to meet Max before. But to hear 2 hours worth of debate about poetry. I don't remember 2 hours worth of debate about poetry in my freshman English class. So I suspect that if nothing else came out of that day, Max got 7 people thinking about poetry, and probably 19 actually of all legislators, thinking about poetry in a way that really, I think, fosters and will ultimately be for the best for the poetry community throughout Nassau County. My one regret is that I was in the minority on that vote. But having said all that, sitting through that hearing and seeing over a dozen people come out in support of Max told me that without hearing a word of his poetry, he was a man who has clearly fostered poetry and made poetry a cause for himself and for so many people here in Nassau County. And for that, I want to congratulate him. I will not repeat most of what's been said in the papers. It seems to have been repeated many, many times. I suspect that if I took a random survey in this yard, I would find that Max Wheat is already the Poet Laureate of Nassau County.
Yeah!
And not to defend anyone, but I can tell you that since there were 12 members of the legislature who were not privy to that committee meeting, I do know that I am not the only legislator who would have supported you had they had the opportunity. And whether or not it would have been 10, I can't say, but I certainly can tell you this. I congratulate you. You are an example for everyone to follow. You are a mentor for so many sitting here today, and you represent, I believe, what is best about the art of poetry. And I want to congratulate you. Thank you.
I was on the Nassau County Poet Laureate selection panel, which voted unanimously in favor of Maxwell Corydon Wheat Jr. to be the Nassau County Poet Laureate. He was selected based on his wonderful poetry and his lifetime of outstanding community service for poetry. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. Besides the many years Maxwell Corydon Wheat Jr. worked as a journalist and teacher, he has devoted his life to poetry and has become the #1 advocate for poetry on Long Island. A few of his achievements. He has published 6 books of poetry and has received many awards, including the Walt Whitman Long Island School of Poetry Award and the first annual Herman Melville Award, and many awards for his excellence in teaching. He is a member of the American Academy of American Poets and many Long Island poetry groups, including the Live Poet Society, the Long Island Poetry Collective, Performance Poets Association, and the North Sea Poetry Scene. Currently, he conducts many poetry programs, including the following: one at this beautiful home, Cedarmere, the home of William Cullen Bryant. He's reading of poems of the classic and contemporary poets, as well as the ones our own Long Island poets, William Cullen Bryant and Walt Whitman. The Prairie Writing Workshop on the Hempstead Plains. For 5 years, Max has conducted prairie writing, poetry writing workshops, and they are now conducted twice a year, May and September. His objectives, besides instruction in poetry writing, is acquainting poets with the plains. It used to be 70,000 acres of Nassau County, now 19 acres. The Freeport Memorial Library, where he conducts workshops and poetry readings. Hofstra University, where he does pro bono lectures for the peer programs. A discussion group about Long Island poets, stressing his concept about the Long Island School of Poetry. The Long Island School of Poetry is a concept he has been working on to bring attention to Long Island residents that poetry is fun, exciting, meaningful, and at important times in people's lives, comforting. The Farmingdale High School Adult Education Program, where his course is You Can Write Poetry. And he believes this in his heart, everybody can write poetry. This is where I met him. This is where he opened up a whole new poetry world for me and many of his students in the most gentlest, wonderful manner. Also, when Max travels, he gives poetry readings and lectures in different parts of the country. Most recently, a program at Hobart and William Smith College's, his alma mater. These are some of the programs which demonstrate Max's outstanding dedication to the art of poetry. And there is one other very important component to the Nassau County Poet Laureates panel's unanimous decision to select Maxwell Corydon Wheat Jr. as Poet Laureate. It was you, the poetry community. The poetry community's voice and your enthusiasm for Maxwell. Your voices were like the waves of an ocean, gentle but constant, saying Max is the quintessential poet and deserving of the title of Nassau County Poet Laureate. Everywhere I went, Max's name was mentioned over and over as being deserving to be Poet Laureate. So with great pride, this poetry community gathers here today to bestow the honor of Poet Laureate to Maxwell Corydon Wheat Jr. as our own Nassau County's Poet Laureate in recognition of his outstanding dedication to the art of poetry and his inspiration to generations of poetry lovers throughout Long Island. And we would like Max to come up now, your new Nassau County's...
You're the best, man!